All right, good morning, everybody. Today our class is going to, we're in our third class of this 7-part series. I have to still talk to our adult learning committee, but I'm thinking yesterday I did a little of the polar plunge for sound salmon solutions here in Mukilteo. I talked to one of the ladies that does the education, and they're willing to come here and talk about what they do. So I don't know if I can squeeze it in one of our schedules yet. I'm still looking at that, but probably most likely be the first class on first Sunday in March. So that we'll talk about that here this coming weeks on our next adult learning committee. As I said, today is our third session, how to persuade others to care about climate change. And Susie Oversee I brought this up to our council meeting, and she had asked if she could participate in this third session. So you won't hear me as much. Maybe that's a good thing, but Susie will be spearheading the conversations more on this topic. So that's a good thing. And so we'll start off today with our Bible verse from Hebrews 13, chapter 13, verse 16. Do not neglect to do good and share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God.
Good.
It says you're. Yeah.
And now I'll switch to our first videos. We'll start with the first video. Give me a second while Pastor Parks is showing up now.
Any advice on how we help fellow Christians understand the importance of working to end climate change?
I'm often asked, how do we make people care about climate change? And we often precede that with the assumption that people don't have the right values they need. And somehow we have to figure out how to instill new values into people well past the age where that's even really possible. If you have children, if you've been around children, you know that at an early age it is possible to instill values. And we know that as an adult, sometimes our values can very slowly and somewhat reluctantly change. But overall, trying to change large numbers of people's values in order to care about an issue is not going to work. But here's the good news. The good news is that I'm convinced that 99% of us, perhaps even more, not 100%, but almost, 99% of us already have the values we need to care about climate change. We just haven't connected the dots. In other words, there are already things that we value, things that we hold dear, things that we love, things that we're concerned about, and these things are being affected by the impacts of a changing climate and or would benefit from solutions to a changing climate, but we just don't realize it. And here's the beauty of it. When we approach people from a perspective of, you already care, let me help you connect the dots, first of all, we're not approaching them from a judgmental perspective. Because if you approach somebody with the underlying assumption that you don't care about the right things, you don't have the right values, that perspective can leak through subconsciously, and we are very good at, as humans, at picking that up, at picking up that judgment and that condemnation, that self-righteousness and that holier-than-thou attitude. So rather than approaching people with, I need to fix you or you need to fix yourself, if we approach people with, I'm sure you do care, but you just haven't connected the dots yet. Let me help you connect the dots, and this is really important, to show that not only are you already the perfect person to care, in fact, you do care, you just haven't realized it, but, and this is very key, by acting on this issue, we are an even more genuine expression of who we are. So it isn't that caring about climate change isn't inconsistent with who we are. It's that caring about it and acting on it is a genuine and authentic expression of who we are, and it enables us to express who we are more fully. And that's what we all really want to do. We want to be who we are. So when it comes to understanding the barriers that we've put up, it's really important, I think, to recognize also that the barriers are not just lack of understanding. People say, well, people don't know enough information, so we just need to hit them upside the head with more information. Well, the real problem, though, unfortunately, is this, and social science over the last 10 years has showed this very clearly. First of all, we haven't connected the dots between what we care about and how that's being affected by climate change. So we tend to think, well, I'm not the right person to care. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm not a tree hugger. I don't vote for the right political party. That's just not who I am. Then the second problem we have is one called psychological distance. We humans are very bad at recognizing the risk or the threat posed by issues that we believe are far off in space or in time. In other words, if we think they'll affect us in the future but not now, or if we think they affect people far away but not here, we are really good at pushing those to the side. And then the third problem is solution aversion. Many of us believe the only solutions are unpleasant solutions, unpalatable solutions, solutions that will make our lives worse rather than better, solutions that, frankly, I'd rather have the impacts rather than the solutions to. So how do we address these real problems? We address them through exactly what we were talking about, through talking about climate change, through connecting the dots between what we already care about, why it matters, and what we can do to fix it. So the same steps that we just saw as the problems can be turned into solutions.
Marco muted. How do we?
Hey, Marco, we can't hear you.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I'm doing too many things at once. Yeah, so I'll read the question real quick, and then Susie can start the discussion with the whole team. So question number one, we haven't connected the dots between what we care about and how that's being affected by climate change. So that's what Dr. Katharine Hayhoe talked about and in our video. So a couple questions is, what do you care deeply about? And can you make any connection to it in climate change? So let me stop sharing.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I just, when Marco presented at council that he was going to be bringing this forward with the Adult Learning Committee, just the whole topic about our faith and as it relates to climate, that's something I was just super excited to hear about. And I said, well, how can maybe I can support this. And so anyway, this subject in particular is something the communication piece is something I've contemplated quite a lot in my career. And since high school, since being, I guess I have been kind of that environmentalist person in my family and carried that through with work. And yeah, how to convince others that to care. And so it's something that resonates pretty deeply with me. And with respect to this question in particular, I've got a few ideas, but I'm very curious to hear what you all think.
Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Ed, yeah.
Probably there's an organization called Women of Science or Science Moms, and they're caring about their children and what's going to happen to them. And they're uniting all over the country, trying to move forward with drama, with art, with books, and so on for kids.
Well, that's great to know. I hadn't heard of that organization. I'll have to look them up.
Christian Science Monitor.
Anyone else have thoughts they want to share? Bad, or else you can jump in.
So,
Marco.
yeah, so just looking at the question again and how this today's class is going to go, but what do you guys really care about? I mean, we care about our family, friends, and this next question, I don't want to lead too much into it, but what's important to you? And right now, for what's going on right now, we're the COVID crisis is. Snohomish County has increased its people getting sick and stuff. So we're today we're not at the church, but we're online together at least. But it just shows you, we got 20 participants right now, but we're showing that we care about our congregation. So what other things that affects you to what makes your priority, that kind of helps decide what you want to do for the congregation?
Well, I'll jump in, Marco. This is Rick. I think what you're saying is, in order to help people get on board, to find common ground, what are those things that we all deeply care about? And I'd say here in Washington State, we certainly care about the environment. And, we have a very beautiful, pristine environment with the oceans, the mountains, we've had issues with fires and landslides and so on because of the climate issue. And, we're wanting to preserve the beauty of our nature that we have treasured so much. So that's one place where we could start talking about, how much we appreciate the beauty of our state, and climate change is a part of, caring for that, continuing to care about that legacy.
Yeah, Kathy?
Lloyd and I volunteer at Mount Rainier National Park because we have a lot of care of it, about the beauty of those spaces. And one of the things that we're trained for as meadow rovers is to approach people with exactly the attitude that the speaker presented, rather than saying, don't do this or don't do this. One of the first things that we say to them is, isn't it a beautiful day? And aren't you enjoying the beauty of being here? We know you care about the parks and want them for your children. And that's why we don't step on the flowers or pick the flowers. And it's just amazing how approaching people with a positive attitude instead of saying, you shouldn't be doing this, makes a difference in how people will listen to you and respond to what you're trying to preserve. So.
Yeah, absolutely, Kathy.
Sometimes it's finding the right language to speak. Coming out, talking about greenhouse gases, talking about climate change in degrees of, and how much carbon we have to reduce. Those sorts of things just don't always resonate, or they're so abstract with folks. And so finding, okay, well, what as Dr. Hayhoe mentioned, what matters to you. We all know and recognize that we need clean water and enough water. I think we're all starting to experience the extreme heat, and how do we prevent that, or how do we make sure that we're taking care of our neighbors? And so it's just finding those common areas of value and linking, like she said, linking how this is actually affecting us. We tend to think it's someone else's problem, or lots of people. It's easy to push off, like she said, but how do we connect it back to what we're experiencing in our own lives?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Susie. Anybody else? Dennis?
Yeah, I just had it. Am I okay? Yeah.
Yep.
So I think communication is obviously key to all of these different issues that we've been advocating for. And I think it's where we're failing the most because I think current day challenges in communication are like none that we've ever seen. It reminded me of a book I read many years ago called What's the Matter with Kansas? And the premise of the book was why people in that state were consistently not only voting, but advocating for things that were not in their best interest or in their community's best interest. And we still see that today. And so it's more than connecting the dots, it's removing the obstacles. And that to me is the toughest part, because I can dismiss any climate change argument to a lot of people by just saying it's just weather. And that takes me off the hook for having to do anything about it. And so I think the challenges are pretty significant, and finding a forum to actually engage people that aren't like-minded is even more difficult.
Yeah, so the book, I read her book, Saving Us, a little promo again, but she talks about that, and that's a struggle. It is a tough struggle. In our next video, we'll talk about, give her an example. She went to a meeting where completely opposite mind thinking of what she has. And the bottom line is talking about what's value to you, what's important to you, and starting that conversation, not to say, like in the video, not to say, hey, the world's crashing down, the sky's falling down. People are going to, automatically tune off. That's just human nature. So yeah, it's when you start these conversations, and this can be with any topic that we've had, classes that we've had in the dialogue series, but it's really just starting that conversation.
Marco, I wanted to share I guess a story that reminded me of the last conversation about building community and trust. Is the story of the Elwha River over on the Olympic Peninsula. So there's multiple documentaries about it. There's one called Return of the River that actually talks about how they built consensus between the tribes, the utility that was actually managing the dams, and also the town of Port Angeles too, of how they all came together. They 100% agreed that it was a good thing to remove the Elwha River dam. That was in 1994, and then eventually in 2010 they got all the funds to start the removal of the Elwha River dam. And then the story afterwards is even more amazing, just seeing, well, the start of it is what my point was, but then afterwards now is if you ever track the Elwha River in terms of the habitats being created, especially in the mouth of the river, and also with the natural things that are coming back, it's really an amazing story. And all started from community consensus.
Yeah, thank you, Chang.
No, this whole subject is so broad and so many faceted that how do you narrow it all down?
That's why you have 7 or 8 sessions.
That's not enough.
No, I mean, no, of course not, but it's
what I'm trying to say is we can see the results of trash in the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the vortex, and the things that have happened there. I don't know how many of you have studied that, but wow, it's mind-boggling. And that's just one little facet. You can turn it around and go back to the other. And you know what I miss? The signs say, keep Everett beautiful. And I go down the road and I see trash. Someone threw it out their window. And let's care about that. Let's get a positive message. Keep Everett beautiful, et cetera, et cetera. And that sets a mindset. And it's also going to hopefully follow through to the bigger, broader issues. And that's just one facet of this whole problem. But like you say, it's that communication.
Even locally, within our church, within our community, doing the little things. And when people start to see that, like our children, that's been brought up too, that the younger generation is more in tune with what needs to happen and what we can do to start changing things. Like I've started not always taking a plastic bag to put around the plastic bag that the produce is already in. I just put it in my cart without putting it in another plastic bag. And our kids, a couple times now, they're like, you guys are older, you don't really need anything. So they've given us a tree someplace for Christmas. Or this Christmas, we're still waiting because the backlog on the orders, but they gave us something, I think it's going to be called a Lumi, and it's going to sit on our kitchen counter and will recycle a lot of the waste that now goes down the garbage disposal or into the trash can, things that you don't think would reuse. The pizza cartons, everything cardboardy like that. I know every week we'd set out one bag that's just full of like containers that other stuff came in. And maybe we wouldn't need to have all those. Everything's in plastic in the produce area, especially. You know, start to do that. My daughter shops at a farmer's market. She doesn't usually buy stuff at the grocery store like that. If she can get it from the farmer and get it without a bunch of added stuff to it that we then have to dispose of. So our Christmas present is coming, and it's a little recycling thing that's going to sit right in our kitchen counters. So
Yeah, that's actually, I've seen those. I've seen YouTube videos on those. It's basically a composting thing. So it takes like eggshells, leftover food, and it's really designed for urban areas or city areas where you live. If you live inside of a tall building, or you don't have your own backyard or anything, where you can put the food in there, and it starts the composting process pretty quickly, and then you can put that compost somewhere, in a put in a pot and create your own tomato plants or whatever the case. So that is definitely a pretty cool tool or a little gadget that anybody can get. There's different sizes of them, but
and just litter too. I mean, the kids, we are going right now to help our daughter with her transportation because she can't drive right now. And so when we drive down the road, or when we're like around Everett High or Cascade High, it's amazing how many people will go out for lunch and then just dump the wrapper on the ground, and you look at, there's trash on the freeways and everywhere. Just don't litter. I mean, just signs that please pick up your own garbage.
I do love, Jim, what you brought up that it's such a unwieldy topic, and it's so big. And I think that's part of the problem is it's so massive and complicated and overwhelming when you think about it. And when people are faced with an overwhelming situation, I think it's kind of human nature to step back, just kind of retreat and not think about it. Right. And so finding, keeping hope alive, keeping thinking, okay, what's just one thing I can do to start, and talking to folks about that, not the big scary picture, but what are some simple things so that people can feel like they're contributing to a solution, is I think something that can be very helpful and productive.
Yep. For the sake of time, good, that was a lot of good discussion points right there. But let's, for sake of time, let's go to our second question. Let me share the screen real quick. So the second question is, do you think that humans are very bad at recognizing the risk or the threat posed by issues that we think are distant and far off? And if you know that climate change is affecting people in Africa, per se, right now, do you think it doesn't matter so much for us in the United States? Susie, you want to start us off?
Oh no, I was I think Evie had a comment.
Sure, I'll jump in there. I think it depends on where you are on the socioeconomic scale. If you're if you're poor, you're living in a poor place in town, you've got too many mouths to feed, you're really just thinking about paying your bills, the roof over your head, is there enough food? You're not thinking about something that's happening somewhere else. We have the luxury of not having to worry about where our next meal is coming from, so we have the ability to care about what's happening somewhere else. But I think the point is well made. It's easier to kind of distance yourself from something that's distant, and it takes a little bit more mental work to bring it closer to home. But if you realize that what's happening somewhere else affects you, it's not that big a leap anymore.
You know, there's it's happening right now that's really drawing attention to a lot of these problems. One is COVID. It's not just local, it's worldwide, and that is coming out more and more over the last couple of years. The other thing is the fires, the change in the weather patterns, the cold and the hot combined hitting us all at this in the same year. The lack of water, clean water. And we're seeing that it's not just here, it's worldwide. It's happening in Africa, Australia, it's happening in Europe, it's happening here, Asia. That is slowly coming out. And it's the last 2-3 years have really brought it out. The air quality from the fires and the storms, tearing up whole cities, and the increase in the amount of them, all that is happening. So it's coming. People are becoming more aware. Now, what do we do?
Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree with you, Jim. But for this question, I really want to harp on, you know, the human mind doesn't really understand, or it does understand, but doesn't. You don't take like it's affecting, you're at risk. So if something that happens other side of the world, yeah, if you hear it on the news or whatever, you're like, oh, you feel bad for that area of the world. But if it doesn't, but how do you make somebody care about that part of the world?
Well, sometimes, excuse me, it takes the fact that, let's say my niece's husband came from that part of the world, and now he's over, he's in our life, and we're learning more about that particular place, wherever it may be. And so when it comes more personal, that's when I think a lot of people take notice more.
And that's what's going on. And we saw on the news, obviously broke the all-time highs this past summer, and then right before the end of the year, we got we hit 13, 17 degrees around here. So that this past 2021, our temperature differential was the greatest ever. I think it was like 97 degrees. From the extreme heat that we had, the heat dome, and then the snow and the freezing cold right after Christmas. So obviously it's affecting us now, but it's when you hear from other places, it's difficult to have that empathy, or what can we do to help them out. There's no, we live a busy schedule in our world today. And it's, when you have to worry about your own family, or worry about work, or worry about other events in your personal life, it's sometimes it's really difficult to think about what's going on somewhere else. Ed.
I was talking with the person the other night and asking the question, what do you think we can do positively? And she said, don't talk to me about that until you deal with Asia, with China, and with India. And she was blaming them for it all. It was a blame factor.
How did you respond, Ed?
I told her that there were opportunities right here in her own backyard, and that she wanted to blame Biden for sending the cement plants, not the cement plants, whatever the plants were, the manufacturing plants over to them, and that the Chinese people didn't really care about their environment. So I shut up because there was nothing more I could do. She felt she was right and I was wrong.
I think we can take an example from other big movements in our lifetimes. And probably the biggest change agent that I can remember was Dr. King. And he advocated direct action. So be clear on what you want and then take action to force decision makers to do what the will of the people is. And that's, I mean, obviously we can't even get our legislature to even approve a motion to discuss climate change. So our system is horribly broken, but it's not beyond repair. And what can change it is our voices. And so it starts with who we choose to represent us and how clear are we and insistent are we on demanding that they represent us in the way that we prefer. That's where the direct action comes in. So you can put compost in your house, that's great. And we should all be doing things that we can do individually, but we have a civic responsibility for this generation and for obviously generations to follow to do what we can globally. And that takes legislative action. That takes big things. This is a big, comprehensive problem. And so I would say we should organize and try to be clear on what our message is, and then be very direct and go to people that represent us and be vocal and visible about that and make them respond.
I agree with what Dennis said. I think Dennis has got it right on. We can work as much as we want in our homes and, change our own behavior, but that's not even a drop in what's going to be needed to make any kind of real change. It has to be the systems. It has to be the industries. It has to be a completely overhaul of how things are done in our country. And that's, I think, the only way that we can make it easier for people who like, I think it was Evie that says people who don't have it in their bandwidth to be able to address this in their own life, then we make it a system. We make it something that everybody does, like, making plastic bags, no longer possible in the grocery store. I mean, people may not make that decision individually, but when you make it across the board, then that's when the change can happen, I guess. So it's so big. We have to do it at the national level.
Shane?
Yeah, just, I don't want to sound so skeptical or so cynical and all, but climate change is kind of a slow burn. I mean, acid rain, Canada put pressure on us in the 70s, right? All the cars. So we went to unleaded cars. It's a slow burn, right? But if you think about I don't say legislative change, but the changes that have happened in our system of government, the EPA, the NRA, arguably even, if you want to say TSA, it almost seems like we're waiting for something catastrophic to happen to actually take action. I mean, people don't remember, you can say 3 Mile Island, you can also say the Cuyahoga River burning on fire, which arguably this is the closest thing to climate change that actually created the EPA, right? But then some people want to dismantle the EPA. So I'm not sure if that's what's going to be the cynical outlook on saying that only something's going to happen is when some other environmental catastrophe or some climate change catastrophe happens or not. But that's at least historically I look back at is when true action was taken versus something that's a slow burn.
It's happening now.
Well, and I guess there's, I don't know, it's hard not to get cynical, and but look at COVID right now, and there's a lot of parallels between our COVID challenges and climate change, but COVID is happening now. It's very quick, but yet we still have so many people who don't think it's real or don't think the threat is real, or I was watching, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Michael Gerson. He's a Washington Post columnist, provides a conservative perspective. and I really like him, but he was on PBS NewsHour a few months ago, and sitting in for David Brooks, and the moderator asked about the climate crisis and how do we get people to care. And his response was, look, we have a miracle drug right now that will save you from a life-threatening disease, and people aren't taking it. I don't think we can change the minds of people on climate change. And that just took the wind out of me. He's right. I mean, he's right on a certain level. And so I found it very despairing. And I'm sorry we're talking about trying to be positive, but I guess that's another, I guess I throw that out there, how it's a big challenge. It is a big challenge that we find ourselves in right now. And, but finding the positive, finding the ways that, trying to connect those dots, it's hard, but, I guess if we sink into that despair, then we're really toast. But I don't know, sorry, I just throw that out there to see what others, anyone has in response to that.
Go ahead, Ed.
And I talk about Boeing. I just read this in an article this past week. It says that Boeing had a milestone United Airlines flight using a 737 MAX 8 and 500 gallons of, they call it SAF, waste resources, grease, cooking oil, and so on. And they flew from Chicago to Washington, D.C. So Boeing is working on it. That's something positive.
Yeah, they're not to say that Carla talked about businesses, big businesses. There is a change in the business climate. One thing, what we're talking about is just talk. Once you put it in social media, once you keep talking to your neighbor, things pick up, and businesses do understand that. You look at the car manufacturers, my next car definitely will be a plug-in hybrid. I just got to talk to Susie, let her talk about the discounts that PUD have. But there is change in business, because people say, I want things better. Why can't this be better? And they do hear that. With aviation, obviously the latest aircraft, the 737 MAX, which I had some other issues as well, but those engines, I already forgot the name of it, but those engines are 20% more fuel efficient than the CFM 56 engines, and then the 787 aircraft is also much fuel efficient than the predecessor, the 767. And now we're going to have the 777X coming out in the next couple of years, and those engines are also much more efficient. So, and that's just using the regular avgas that we have right now. But with these biofuels in the aviation industry, once they get some more testing done. I know Boeing is working on an echo demonstrator, and also with the regulatory agencies. And once they can prove that they're safe to fly, then we can start changing that part of the world, the part of the piece of the puzzle or the pie to reduce the carbon footprint.
I think that's so exciting to hear about those things, but but keep in mind too that these companies are doing that because they're thinking about the bottom line.
Absolutely.
They're not doing it because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because they want to stay in business and they're trying to hedge their bets. So I think going along with what Dennis says, let the business know, let our leaders know what we want, and then maybe that'll help them make these kinds of decisions. So I just like to see the fossil fuel industry jumping in and doing something new and not putting all of their eggs into plastics, which we want to go away. So we have to get to people at what matters. And unfortunately, in our culture, money is what matters. If it affects their pocketbook, that's what they're going to do, and that's what they're going to, or their kids. If they have kids and grandkids, we can talk about making the world better for their grandkids. I don't know how else we can encourage people to do the right thing, but
On that point, though, with the business community, Carlin, you're right. I think, I think corporations are starting to look ahead and realize climate change is going to affect my bottom line. And we saw, Katharine Hayhoe and other videos has talked about Department of Defense seeing it as a threat multiplier. So all of a sudden, these businesses with who have financial and want to stay above the line financially, and they're seeing that threat. And so that's kind of where we've got that nexus where you can start talking to businesses about what they care about, which from a business perspective is money. And so it's coming back to finding where are those commonalities, where are those common values speaking in a way to different entities that in their language and in ways that they know that are important for them to survive is one way of communicating. I know it's a very cynical take, but it's a reality, finding it matters to people or matters to different entities and going from there.
Yeah, I know aviation is such a hot topic, obviously, this area, but we should also keep looking at companies like CocaCola and Nestle, right? I mean, they've got nice, great brands and people love them, have all this nostalgia to them, but they've done some nefarious stuff, right? And I mean, climate change, if anything, affects them the most. And those like a slow burn, like the Coke bottle, which essentially stayed at like 19 cents or whatever forever because they printed all those signs and these whatever else, it was trying to maintain that cost or whatever else. So that's even a slower burn right now. What, a buck a can or whatever else they're making their money and all, but I mean, why do we need to do it? I mean, I'd say that soda streams are going to save the world and all, but I want something flavored and bubbly. Well, I don't have to make so many trips, or they only transport it around. I can just make it here in my my kitchen, right? Same thing with food and transportation in general. Is if we can survive in our square foot area, it's making your own vegetables or buying locally within 100 miles. Those are all kind of compounding to not relying on international commerce.
I do have a question. Getting back, what mysterious things? That's a pretty vague statement. What mysterious things is Nestle's and so forth doing?
Water rights, political influence. I mean, I think they have done nefarious things. I don't know the details enough. I've seen stuff in the past, but I think people should pay attention, right? I'm just trying to equate brands and the brand affinity people have to say, well, is this the right brand I should be supporting, right company I should be supporting and buying and putting my money towards?
I think, Jim, I think Chang said nefarious, not mysterious. If that helps.
All right, so yeah, it's 11:30 now. We still have one more video. It's a little bit longer video than we've had in the past, but it does touch on these topics that we're having. So let me share my screen again. All right, this time I'm off mute. But yeah, so that was I saw that video a couple months ago, and that really just encouraged me to do this class as well. So, but we're running out of time. But let's see how far we go. So our third question is: well, all depend on God's creation for the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. Yet we often think that you must be a certain type of person, an environmentalist, a tree hugger, to care about the climate. What can you say as an individual to talk more about climate change and some of the changes that you have made as a response? Go ahead, unmute yourself if you're ready to have something to say. Susie, you got anything?
I'd like to share something that's not about us, but about our daughter who lives in the Phoenix area. And recently she shared with me that they had put solar panels on their house, and that in fact, they were getting money back from the public utility because they were not using as much energy in their home as they were generating. And I hadn't even realized that they had put solar panels on their house. But as she shared that story, I thought, well, if that story can be told over and over again, that's a way for skeptics who might not care about climate change or wouldn't be willing to admit that they did, to say, oh, this can impact my personal finances in a positive way. So that's a small thing. So even though it's not our story, it's our daughter's story, and we can share that.
Thank you, Beth. Anybody else? Ed? Go ahead, you're still muted, sorry.
When our girls were small, my wife was an avid cigarette smoker. And our youngest daughter came up to her and tugged and said, "Mommy, are you going to die on us?" She discovered that the youngest daughter was allergic to the cigarette smoke. So she enrolled herself into the, what was a Schick Center for Smoking, and stopped just smoking. I think, and I'm talking about these moms, science moms, if we can get more literature and more influence with our children, there may be more people who are going to be moved because they want their children to survive and be safe.
Kind of going back a minute to what Beth's example, you know, again, connecting in the dots to what people like, what people care about. So I was on part of a focus group a couple of years ago amongst some electric vehicle drivers, and one of the people on the panel, she, you know, kind of said, I don't really care about this climate change business. She's a driver, Tesla driver. She's like, but I love cars, and I just bought this Tesla, and the experience, it's the best car I've ever owned. The way it drives, all the technology, you know, she's just going on and on and on about how much she loved this car. And of course, it kind of, you know, killed me, you know, like the climate change part wasn't really, you know, important to her. But the thing is, you know, she's just going on about how awesome it is to drive an electric car, and so again, you know, it's and car manufacturers, you know, are starting to, you know, more promote kind of the tech, the ease of operation, you know, you don't have to you know, take your cars in for service and all that stuff, kind of over the eco side, and of course we want to, I think, you know, everyone here on this call cares about the climate. We want people to have that same, you know, care as well. But sometimes you just have to go straight to, this is just really cool technology.
Yeah, absolutely. That's way you can start that conversation with somebody. You know, it's not just saying sky's falling down, but hey, you know, this car can go from 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds and has ludicrous speed. But stuff like that. So that's how you can start engaging these conversations. So we're already past our 1 hour slot as usual, but let me ask you one more question and a couple, just a few more responses, and we'll close it out in prayer. So let me share the screen again. So our last question for today is, do you think that the solutions to climate change sound worse than the impacts of climate change because they mean you will have to change how you live now? Yeah, so that's a loaded question. I see that, but you know, I'm over 40, but I've seen things change. You know, when my parents were when I was young and I was living in South Florida, you know, we had a old Ford Lincoln or whatever it was, and the size of a boat and, probably went, 7 miles a gallon. Things have changed over these years and things are getting better, but doesn't mean, but still, obviously, we can do better.
Marco,
Yep.
let me jump in. And I think, we are the most privileged people in the world. And if we have to change our lifestyle a little bit, so be it. When we were living in California during the drought, and they're still going through a terrible drought. I remember how we had to ration water. We couldn't flush our toilets. We couldn't, use the shower, but maybe once, every couple of days, and couldn't water our lawns, and so on and so on. And we did that willingly because we knew that we had to, and so I think we should just be able to step up and say, whatever we need to do to help make this situation better, even though it causes some inconvenience, and we still are tremendously privileged.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rick.
I think it's economics, supply and demand, right? Reduce your demand on things. I mean, whether it's low flush toilets, diffusers on your water, or, even, kind of Susie, your point about, oh, that's a cool science and technology thing. I think that's what's going on with e-bikes, right? I mean, e-bikes kind of start out in recreation, but well, if I got a big enough e-bike, I can use that to go to the grocery store versus, driving my car or something. So, whatever it takes, those are the little things, but it's also just supply and demand is reduce your demand or need for things. I like the idea of shutting the switch off to shut everything off in your home or whatever else is, I think I grew up in the 70s and hearing this in school of, shut all the lights off whenever you leave the room, or all these other things. And maybe these common stories or lessons have been lost, where you just want something on all the time. Your computer too, and obviously the computers have done well to have like screensavers and automatic shutoffs and all, but it's supply and demand. Is if we reduce our demand on things, then you won't need the supply.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't make these changes, human nature, we don't like making changes, and we don't make the changes quickly, but as we start, do small things, and we improve upon, keep making these minor adjustments. That's the way we're going to get to that carbon neutral point down the road, whatever that's going to happen. Hopefully before the year 2100, but so that our kids and our grandkids can have that quality of life that we've had, this privileged life that we've had.
Let me just say something, Marco.
Yeah, go ahead, Phyllis.
But this kind of all comes down to the poverty thing as well, because if you don't have the money to invest in these eco things, or to put solar panels in, or to buy a car that you want to, but it all comes down to the not being able to do that, maybe.
Yeah, Susie, this is a good question for you. So, like, you've been working at PUD for a long time. Have you seen prices drop down on solar panels and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, prices are dropping on solar panels and EVs, but Phyllis raises a really good point, and it was brought up earlier. I think Evie brought it up earlier. That there's people who have to put food on the table, if are worried about their bills. A lot of these things are still very much unattainable, and so I know there's a lot of so I guess to that end, technology is not the answer for everyone, and thinking about our systems, as Carla brought up earlier, and thinking about how to kind of bring everyone along is definitely something thinking about at work, but at the state legislature, in the state legislature at the federal level, I know those are conversations that are being had, because there is definitely a divide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Jim. Oh, you're on mute still?
Being a senior citizen and all that, we've had to change our home, and we now have a little money to invest. So I'm investigating how to invest. I've never really had to do it before, but I'm finding that they asked, one of the first things the company we're working with said, is there anything you don't want to invest in? Do you have deals? And the first thing that came up was this climate change. I don't want to increase the threat to the climate and everything. And so I started looking at things, and I'm finding that there are a lot of companies out there that are voluntarily doing things to increase their responsibility for cleaning up the climate. Apple, Amazon, Tesla or Musk has done an awful lot. There's also science is developing right now at an alarming rate that is going to make it much better for us. And artificial intelligence is going out, and it's going to make major changes in a very short time. So there's chances here for us to do things. There's chances that we're going to clean up the world, but it's going to take all these things we've talked about, talking about it, spreading the word, maybe writing out to our congressman, voting for the right people, not being negative but positive. So all this is really good, and I'm sorry to preach, but it's something that I've discovered recently, and I wanted to share it. So
good. Yeah, no worries. So it's already past noon. So once again, we do have more classes. So we're not ending this topic today. So just for a little admin, next Sunday we won't have the class. We'll have our annual church congregational meeting on the budget. So that's at 10 o'clock. The link should be in the e-news, so you'll be able to access that. Susie will be there. I will be there at the church to provide that discussion for our budget. And then our next class, session 4, will be February 6th. And now we'll talk more about what we can do as a church. So something to think about. And let me go ahead and let's close in prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk and learn how to talk to people in our congregation, to our neighbors, to people around our area. Give us the strength to do our discipleship as we are stewards for your church and for your world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Margot.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Mary. Good to see you.
Thank you. Peace be with you. Oh.